Welcome to the world's greatest health show. My name is Sean Buckley. I'm with the Natural Health Product Protection Association, and I'm with Dr. Sean Caesar, who has spoken to us earlier, but I've asked Dr. Caesar if he would come back so that we could have a little bit of a discussion on something that I'd actually forgotten to, ask him about the last time he was on. And so please watch the earlier presentation by Dr. Caesar, but he had explained to us that he's a naturopathic doctor. You've been practicing now, I think, 25 years.
Yeah.
And you have focused and gotten extra training in the area of cancer and pain management. And you shared with us the journey of a cancer patient who came to you with stage 4 breast cancer, basically given no more than 3 months to live. She'd done the chemo and everything else, and the tumors were still growing. So for her, the medical system was a dead end. She comes to you. She doesn't want to die. And you had listed several treatments that you put her on, and basically that she lived for another 2.5 years after that, and was very thankful to be able to see the birth of her granddaughter and the like. But I want to ask you if you want to just go through those treatments again, and then let's talk about how we can't talk about those treatments generally, because this censorship issue has health consequence. Because if people like that patient don't know that they could come to somebody like you and actually extend their lives, and in many cases, live for years and years and years, actually solve the issues, then they can't benefit from that. Then the path for them basically is suffering and death. So can you share with us what treatments you put this person on, and then we'll switch into a discussion about how you've been prevented from sharing that you can help with people.
Yeah. So the first question about what we use to treat her is of importance in that these medicines should be known to everyone who has cancer as potentials for their treatment, not only to help with a standard treatment, but these treatments have their own anti-cancer workings as well. So the one that's most familiar, and I'll talk about it most, but we do way more IVs than this with our cancer patients, is the IV vitamin C. And this is what usually patients can relate to and listen to when I explain to them. And the nice thing about the vitamin C is that it doesn't have the harmful side effects, certainly much different than radiation, but it distinguishes between healthy cells and cancer cells in and of how it works. So IV vitamin C, it's the only way to get the blood up to a dose that you can have anti-cancer actions. You can't do it by taking a bunch of oral vitamin C. The blood maxes out and doesn't go any higher. With the doses that you get at the IV vitamin C, you're able to have an anti-cancer effect by making sure that hydrogen peroxide is released in the tumor environment or in the cancer environment. Now, hydrogen peroxide is H2O2, which is basically H2O water with an extra oxygen tacked onto it. And so the cancer cells don't like H2O2. It doesn't like hydrogen peroxide. When it's released by high-dose vitamin C IV, it creates oxidation and damages cancer cells, which is called apoptosis. So cancer cells can actually die off by the use of high-dose vitamin C, whether it's 25 grams, 50 grams, 75 grams, 100 grams, sometimes we even go up to 200 grams. However, the cells that are right next door to it, it's not like chemotherapy or it's not like radiation. The healthy cells next to it takes the H2O2 and say, okay, we've got enzymes, we can break this up. We can just make a nice hydrogen and a nice water molecule, and we'll just use that. So the healthy cells don't get targeted and don't get hit by oxidation from the high-dose vitamin C, while the tumors and the cancer environment does get hit directly by the high-dose vitamin C and the hydrogen peroxide.
Now, and I know you use some other treatments, but let's just keep the conversation simple with vitamin C. So my understanding is like there are hundreds and hundreds of studies, like published peer-reviewed studies, showing what you've just indicated that vitamin C is an extremely strong anti-cancer.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and the studies unfortunately don't make their way to the oncology side. As much as I'll send them to the oncology side, the thought is that vitamin C just interferes with chemotherapy, period. Don't do it. And oncologists are expected to be the experts on this whole thing. However, the notion of using the IV vitamin C is a different thing. That's our expertise. And we know that at that level, it acts as a pro-oxidant, not as an antioxidant. So let me just explain that. Cancer treatments such as chemotherapy work as an oxidant, exactly opposite to antioxidant, as an oxidant to destroy cancer. Anything that's an oxidant destroys. As IV vitamin C gets in, it's a pro-oxidant, not an antioxidant. And I have writings and papers and everything like that I'll send out to the oncology side. And I did a meeting with about 50 oncologists on a case of cholangiocarcinoma, which is gallbladder cancer, who did so well. They said, "What are you doing?" "Well, I'm doing naturopathic treatments, including vitamin C. We're doing oncotherm hyperthermia. We're doing mistletoe." And they were so curious because she did so well. I was on a discussion like this one with 50
Mm-hmm.
other oncologists, explaining and just driving home this notion that is out there 100%, that somehow vitamin C interferes and doesn't help, whereas the studies like you mentioned, which are, we've got hundreds of studies, show the benefit of this high dose vitamin C.
And again, we'll just keep it simple with vitamin C, but there's several other naturopathic treatments, like you mentioned, mistletoe. And my understanding is the approach that you use is basically several anti-cancer treatments to basically make sure, because cancer will adapt to just a single treatment. And you've had tremendous success, and you shared some of that with us earlier. I mentioned this one stage 4 breast cancer patient, but is it fair to say, you've just had countless number of patients that came to you because the mainstream medical system was a dead end. They were basically being told there's nothing else we can do. And they've had tremendous success, lived for years and years and years, with quality of life, solely because of naturopathic treatments.
Yeah, and those are a percentage of the patients that we do treat that have said, okay, there's no more cancer treatment that I can get from my oncology team. And then there's a large percentage of patients who are going through chemotherapy. Some are going through their immunotherapies or their targeted therapies, which are new therapies, and they want to work together to get the best results. And a large part of those studies that we had mentioned before, Sean, those ones do use in conjunction with therapy, and says, hey, if you're taking paclitaxel, IV vitamin C, 4 or 5 studies, increases their chances of fulfilling chemotherapy, increases their chances of living longer, and increases their red blood cell count, their white blood cell count. These are all important for their outcomes. And there are a myriad of studies that do show that.
Right. So just so that I'm clear, so what you're sharing is so people that are taking chemotherapy, there's study after study after study showing that they're going to have better results if, in addition to chemotherapy, they are taking a treatment like intravenous vitamin C. Did I get that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And this segue, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Sean. Go ahead.
No, and I didn't mean to cut you off. So go ahead, please.
Well, but the people aren't allowed to know this, and that's the problem is that patients know they need help with their cancer, that this isn't the whole answer, and yet the information is not at their fingertips. They cannot go online to find out who does what and how can I get some really experienced help with my cancer using natural products. And this came out actually about 7 or 8 years ago when we were advertising for our cancer treatments and these kinds of things. And suddenly Google had switched just in one day the whole algorithm, and suddenly we were bumped to page 5 or 6. And at the top of that came up the Rochester Clinic, came up cancer.org. And suddenly the experts or the information that patients were getting on alternative cancer treatments specifically was no longer for those using it, like us naturopathic oncologists, but are now from these medical institutions that have an input on that. And that was the first indication that something was off in people actually getting to know, okay, what are these things all about? And now it's very difficult. We can't put studies. We cannot say IV vitamin C for cancer. We can't put those two together. We can.
And I'm just going to slow you down. When you say you can't, like, so here you're a naturopathic doctor.
Mhm.
You have, it took you 7 years of training to qualify as a naturopathic doctor. You'd said in our other interview that basically naturopathic doctors are the most highly trained of all healthcare professionals, even more trained than medical doctors. You took extra training to get, basically to be able to focus on treating with cancer. And you've been doing this for a quarter century. You've probably managed, 50,000 plus cancer patients. You know what you're talking about. You've read the research, but you aren't allowed to share the research or even to tell the world that you can help people through their cancer journey. Am I right about that?
Yeah, you can't. We can't call ourselves a cancer treatment center. You cannot pair treatments with cancer at all. So, and this is a limitation that Health Canada has put on us, and then our association gets on board to say,
But on behalf of Health Canada, though, right? So when
yeah,
you say your association, you mean the Naturopathic College in Manitoba.
right, right. And what
But
happened?
they rely on Health Canada saying, well, Health Canada says you can't say this, and so please don't say it.
Right, right. And not only that, but the association can go even further because my site was cleared. Health Canada said it's all fine, everything's fine. And the association went even further. So some associations will even take it a step further than what Health Canada has done.
Right. So just sticking with Health Canada, and this is important because you've actually run across this personally, where Health Canada has told you, stop telling people the truth about being able to help with cancer.
Yeah, and it would be nice if they actually phrased it that way, to stop telling people the truth, because their words were certainly quite a bit different than that. Is basically you cannot say that you treat cancer, you cannot say that you use X, Y, or Z to treat cancer. You cannot say you're a cancer. So there's specific things that are put forward, but the truth is that there is much more, and this is more on the truth side, which is not the focus of Health Canada, in my experience, is not the focus on what's best for the healthcare of Canadians, but the focus on what's a completely different agenda.
And so back to the intravenous vitamin C. Um, I do appreciate that there are some other uses for intravenous vitamin C, but a big use of it is as a cancer treatment. And so you're actually now limited. So you're allowed to say, I offer intravenous vitamin C treatments, but you can't say what those treatments might help with. Or basically you'll be attacked by both Health Canada and the Naturopathic College of Manitoba.
Yeah, and not only that, I also put on there, I said, oh, well, I'll take it off, and that it's an antioxidant or a pro-oxidant. You can't do that either. You
So you
cannot.
can just say you offer the treatment.
All you can say is that we have IV vitamin C. That's it. There is nothing that can be said about it whatsoever. No studies involved. Can't say, okay, here's a referral to a different site that has the studies on it. So this is the current state that we're in, which is not only the main focus is on patients being able to do what's best for them and getting proper the proper advice and getting the proper information, which isn't available.
Right. And so what strikes me is really interesting about this Dr. Caesar is so treatments like intravenous vitamin C that can be really helpful for serious conditions like cancer, whether that's in conjunction with chemotherapy, whether it's apart from chemotherapy, because some patients might decide for whatever reasons, hey, I don't want to take chemotherapy. I know as a fact that just because you've shared with us before, sometimes you counsel your patients, well, you should take chemotherapy. Like you're just trying to focus on what do you think in your professional judgment is going to be the best, lead to the best outcomes for your patients. So sometimes you would be encouraging patients to take chemotherapy, but some people might decide, no, I don't want to do that. Well, they can't even learn about IV vitamin C and other treatments.
Uh,
And that's got to have health consequences. Like,
Absolutely. I mean, patients, they come in, they say, how come I wasn't able to find this earlier? And I say, I'm sorry, but we just can't tell. We just can't let people know about what can be done to help you. And it's an unending frustration for people not to have access to that kind of information here in Canada. They are, it ends up being so detrimental, not only to their health, but also to getting help early, which is essential for deadly conditions like cancer.
yeah, no, and I appreciate you sharing with me. And it's why I asked, oh, I got to have you back, because I think it's just such an important point for Canadians to understand that, you know, we all agree people can't make, you can't be fraudulent. And there's law after law, not just the Food and Drug Act, criminal code, or, telecommunications legislation. Canadians are protected against fraudulent claims. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about being able to share, and that, treatments like intravenous vitamin C actually have valid uses that you want to know about as Canadians, and there's complete censorship about it, and there's health consequences to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's not just intravenous vitamin C. So you're not allowed to share your successes. You're not allowed to share about treatments that are effective for things. All you can say is we offer this treatment and that treatment, but you can't let anyone know even what they're about.
And patient testimonials are absolutely not allowed. So you can't have a patient who says this and then we quote that. It's something that's, I would imagine, would be frustrating for new naturopathic doctors on board, but patients love to hear from patients themselves. How did you do? Because otherwise, it might sound like a sales kind of thing, but it's not. It's that patients should be able to express themselves, and you should be able to share that information as well. And also, you should be able to share the science. If there's science and there's studies behind it, why? Throughout my whole training in naturopathic medicine, we had all the studies behind, okay, how does magnesium work? How does calcium work? How does selenium work? Whatever it might be. And then suddenly to get on into this world in the last 10 years or so, where this is forbidden, is really such a step backwards in the evolution of healthcare in Canada.
Yeah, like my personal opinion is instead of our law being that you can't share any health information, that the law should be you have to share absolutely everything you have. The good, bad, and the ugly, so to speak. I had, and you might find this interesting. So I have a Health Canada file, and we're in court, and Health Canada hires a psychiatrist who runs a company to get psychiatric drugs, primarily antidepressants, approved under, Health Canada's approval process so that they can be licensed. Now, that process is so expensive. So the only drugs that ever go through there are novel chemicals that have a patent, because the cost is so prohibitive. So, those companies are in a hurry. You got a drug patent. The maximum life for that's 25 years. So you want to get it on the market as quickly as possible. And the psychiatrist, it's under oath. Like we've got court transcript for this, starts complaining under oath about how hard it is to get a new antidepressant through the new drug approval process, because he's got to give Health Canada 2 sizable double-blind clinical trials showing a statistical separation between the sugar pill and the drug. And so if there's a statistical separation, it's almost like there's a magic formula, and then we pretend that means the drug works. We just ignore that the whole study was designed to show this separation, and that doesn't mean in the real world that the drug works. But for drug approval purposes, we pretend that means the drug works. And he's saying, I've got to give Health Canada 2 double-blind clinical trials showing the statistical separation with the sugar pill. So he says under oath, for an antidepressant, I run 8. I run right out of the gate. I run 8 at the same time. So he runs 8 double-blind clinical trials because he's learned he has to do that to get 2. So, he's got to run 8 on average to get 2 that show that, the drug works. Now, the other 6 could be inconclusive. They could show the sugar pill works better than the drug. They could show the drug works better than the sugar pill, but the safety signals they don't want to share with Health Canada. The public isn't told that there were 6 failed clinical trials. And, if I'm a parent and a doctor wants to put my child on that antidepressant, all I know is Health Canada's approved that it works. And I could make better health decisions for my child if the law was, I've got to have access to all the clinical trials that were run so that I can make an informed decision. But we have this censorship. And in the natural health community, we tend to have information that of successes like you've had. And if that can't be shared, how can a parent make a decision for a child? That's what I find frustrating about this. I don't know what your thoughts are.
It's really they should get in as early as possible to get an approach that goes beyond just a solely medical approach. And with the studies that you had mentioned, yeah, we should know that this study had 6 other studies that failed and 2 did work, and it should be on an informational handout that's given right away. The same thing with chemotherapy. So when patients,
but it's just like you can't share your successes with intravenous vitamin C. They're not allowed to share the failed clinical trials. There's full censorship.
the censorship sounds to me, and this is really your area, it sounds like it's completely flawed for the sake of people who are actually getting and looking for actual care, right?
Oh, it fully protects the chemical drug industry.
Mm-hmm.
If that type of information was out, and that's our publicly funded healthcare system, if the chemical drug companies had to share with us the data they actually had, if the law was you have to share everything, because people report their adverse reactions many of the time directly to the drug companies. They have the animal studies, they have everything. If that our confidence in the publicly funded healthcare system would severely falter if the law was that you had to share all the health information, and the public confidence in the natural health community would skyrocket if we had to do that. If I can just share some anecdotal evidence, like if I'm with manufacturers that were in business before we had this licensing requirement imposed on us, that like the law came into force in 2004, but really we didn't have full compliance even required until 2015, so it's really recent. But I can sit down with an old school manufacturer, and they will totally agree with me. The market told us whether a natural health product worked, and it still does, even though we have the licensing scheme. Because Sean, what would happen is there'd be a need out there, and somebody would consult with people like you. Well, what do you think would be a good remedy for this condition? And then it would be manufactured. Well, if it didn't work, people would never buy another bottle. Like if I have to pay for something and I don't notice a difference, I'm not going to buy it again. And right away, it's not doing well, and then the stores stop ordering it, and it just disappears. But if it works, then it's people are buying and buying and buying, and the other manufacturers see, and they make similar products, and all of a sudden you got 3 or 4 products, and now people are being helped, and it stays, right? Like the Canadian consumer is not dumb, and people come back to you because it works, not because it doesn't work.
Yeah, and it only makes sense because patients are paying out of pocket, and that's why I love working with because I don't have stragglers. Patients complain that when they go in for their pain, they're always saying, "Well, I'm not going to give you that hydromorphone, or I'm not going to give you that morphine because it's an addictive opiate." These patients need it. When they come in to see me, they're not going to pay money because they're faking about their pain, and the medical system is always all over these patients and not wanting to prescribe for them because they think that they might be, just feigning their symptoms and that kind of thing. But it's not the case with me, and that's why every patient that comes in has a legitimate concern, whether it's pain or whether it's cancer or any other disease. I'm in it full to get them better, back on track again.
Right. So, Dr. Caesar, I called you back so we could have this discussion about censorship. Is there anything else that you think we should cover about that? I think it was important for Canadians to learn that practitioners like yourself actually can't share what you would consider to be exciting treatments, and then so if Canadians can't know, they can't access them, and it's just part of the world we live in right now.
Yeah, and new information. As new information comes out, there's more studies in Europe, and there's a lot more studies in everywhere. As for example, there's a periodical that's put out for the hyperthermia treatments that we do for cancer. This heats up tumors, can help to break down tumors, and is used in Germany as a conjunction along with the standard of care. So the hyperthermia is another thing. It puts out a journal every 3 months with new studies with every different kind of cancer. So it's replenished, and I can't take that and say, hey, there's some new information on hepatic carcinoma, which is liver cancer, and using the hyperthermia that was just published about a month ago. I can't keep people updated on that kind of information and let them know what is out there and actually is what is happening in the world of research. And so there's just so many pieces of this that are really, and the focus is on the patients. They really should be able to gain access to this information here in Canada, and they just haven't been able to.
You can't even share that Germany covers them as cancer treatments. Actually, it's part of their medical system
Right.
that it's covered. Patients don't even have to pay for it.
They don't pay for their hyperthermia treatments there. There's 2 machines that they do use, and also their mistletoe therapy. So when I went over to train in Germany, I said to the presenters, I said, how can you use that high dose of mistletoe? Patients, can't afford it. And they looked at me and they said, what do you mean afford it? It's paid by our healthcare system. So it's a whole different system over there where the oncologists are actually trained. All the medical staff is trained and medical practitioners are trained in natural medicines. And you had brought up St. John's wort. St. John's wort was one of the highest prescribed medicines in Germany, including all of the drugs, because of that incorporation of using what's called pharmacognosy, which is the herbal medicine pharmacy, along with the training of just standard drugs and surgery and these kinds of things in their medical schools. So oncologists there have training in natural medicine as well.
Right. But again, you can't even share that.
Yeah.
You couldn't run an ad saying, do you know in Germany, these are cancer treatments paid for by the German government that Germans don't have to pay for, because Health Canada would go after you saying you can't say that about these treatments. You can just say these treatments exist, but not in any way suggest what they're for.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's an absolute isolation where you can't put those two together, from treatment to what it actually treats.
An interesting thing also about that, Sean, is so just so that people watching understand. So we're forced to get licensed by Health Canada, whether we're chemical or natural, And so Health Canada, for the chemical drugs, will approve them for conditions, so like antidepressant. Health Canada will not approve a natural product for a condition. So, the natural product claim will be maybe supports mental health or supports central nervous system or something that doesn't really tell you what it can do as part of the game. But for both chemical and natural, you can't go beyond that label claim. And what's interesting is, so let's even just talk in the world of chemical drugs, is often a drug will be approved, Dr. Caesar, as you know, for one condition. And then, so doctors will be using it for the one condition, but the patients will be reporting, oh yeah, but this went away and that went away. And then, so there'll be case series or case reports published on it. And before you know it, doctors are using a drug approved for one thing for something entirely different because they've learned it works for something different. That can't be shared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the idea of repurposed drugs. And there are quite a few studies on that in cancer specifically. Like I said, that's my focus. So that's what I know. And when I have my prescribing rights and the ability to use things like metformin or atorvastatin, these drugs that have a secondary action, is something that can't be published on the drug side either. And patients should be taught about that stuff. They should know access to, like you said, all the information, including the drugs. Like, we're not only on this for the natural medicines, we're on it for access to all information. And I think that that's the important balance to really strike with the lawmakers, is that this is for everybody's benefit to be able to reach out and grab and say, okay, how does this medicine work? Oh, it also has these effects, and then make a good choice from that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have enjoyed this discussion. So
Yeah.
thank you for coming back. Do you think there's anything else we need to cover on that censorship point? It's an important point. So
Yeah. I think we've covered, but we'll think of something else, Sean. It will certainly.
yeah, I'll have you back a third time. Well, Dr. Caesar, thank you so much for your willingness to come back and have a discussion about this. We had finished our last one, and I thought, oh no, I'd forgotten to have that discussion. So I'm really thankful that you're willing to come back. And on behalf of the World's Greatest Health Show, thank you for being willing to share with us.
Thank you.